I remember the way the light hit the room that afternoon. Sharp angles of sunlight cut across the hardwood floor, and the house was unnervingly quiet. It was the kind of silence I had grown accustomed to in recent months. Rachel had taken up late yoga sessions and worked dinners that seemed never-ending. But today, something felt different. Perhaps it was the oppressive stillness, or the way the air felt heavy, as if it was holding its breath along with me. I found the note by accident. Rachel was in the shower, her phone left carelessly on the kitchen counter. Normally, I wouldn't snoop, but something deep inside me, perhaps the same part of me that had started waking up at 3 a.m., drenched in sweat, wondering why I felt so unsettled, pushed me forward. Her phone was locked, but then I saw it. A crumpled piece of paper half tucked under her pillow, peeking out like it was begging to be found. I pulled it out, heart already racing. It wasn't a love letter, not really, but the words were enough to make my chest tighten. I can't stop thinking about yesterday, same time next week. David. The handwriting was messy, rushed like whoever wrote it didn't have much time. My hands trembled as I shoved it back under the pillow, heart pounding in my ears as the water in the shower stopped. She was still humming, completely unaware of the bomb that had just detonated in my mind. I forced myself to sit at the kitchen table, fingers tapping nervously against the wood. I couldn't let her see the panic. I needed to think, needed a plan. The shower stopped, and soon enough, Rachel's voice floated down the hallway, soft and carefree. "Michael?" she called, her tone light, innocent. "You home early?" I couldn't answer right away. My mouth was dry, and all I could see was that damn note, crumpled under her pillow like a landmine waiting to go off. She appeared in the doorway, her dark hair still damp, a small smile on her lips. "Hey," she said, leaning against the frame. "Everything okay?" No, nothing was okay. I needed to know who the hell David was, but I didn't say that. Instead, I smiled back, something tight and forced, like my skin was stretched too thin over my skull. "Yeah, fine," I managed. "Just got out of work early. How was your day?" She didn't even hesitate. "Pretty good. Same old, same old. How about you?" I watched her closely, searching for cracks in her facade, for anything that would betray her. But Rachel was smooth, like glass, pouring herself a glass of water without missing a beat. "I was thinking," I began, my voice betraying none of the chaos underneath. "Maybe we could go out tonight. Dinner?" She tilted her head, considering. "Dinner sounds nice, but I already made plans. Yoga with Anna. It's been on the calendar all week, remember?" "Right. Yoga. Of course." I nodded, and she smiled. A practiced, easy smile I'd seen 1,000 times but now couldn't trust. The room felt colder. "Rain check?" she added, already pulling out her phone as if the conversation was over. "We'll make a night of it this weekend." "Yeah," I muttered, my mind already racing ahead. This weekend. That night, after she left for yoga, I did what I had promised myself I'd never do. I followed her. My hands were tight on the wheel as I trailed behind her car, at a safe distance, trying to keep my breathing steady. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe her meeting Anna, laughing over smoothies after their class. Maybe I'd feel ridiculous, paranoid, guilty even, for doubting her. But then, she didn't turn left for the yoga studio. Instead, she went right, out toward the edge of town where the streetlights were sparse. It took everything in me not to speed up, not to rush to see exactly where she was going. She pulled into the parking lot of a small, nondescript hotel. My stomach dropped. I parked a few spaces back, watching as she got out of the car and walked straight inside. She didn't hesitate, didn't look back. She knew where she was going. For a moment, I thought about leaving. Maybe I didn't want to know what came next. Maybe ignorance was bliss, or at least better than this festering knot of dread twisting in my gut. But I couldn't. Not now. I waited, the seconds dragging into minutes until a man, a stranger, appeared from the hotel entrance. Tall, lean, and purposeful. He looked around briefly before heading in the same direction Rachel had. My breath caught in my throat. "David." I was out of the car before I even realized what I was doing. I followed, my mind blank except for one thought. I needed to see this for myself. Needed to know. I kept to the shadows as I entered the lobby, staying distant but close enough to see them. They met in a hallway near the back, Rachel and David. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. His hand rested briefly on her back, guiding her into a room, and the door closed behind them. And just like that, it was real. I stood there for what felt like an eternity. The walls pressing in, the air heavy and suffocating. There was no going back from this, no pretending, no explanations that could fix the crack that had just split my life in two. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to think. Needed to figure out what I was dealing with. Because something told me this was more than just an affair. I headed back to the car, my breath ragged, my mind spinning. I had a feeling that the worst was still ahead of me. I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a furnace, burning through every memory of our marriage, trying to piece together where it all went wrong. Rachel came home late, as expected, but I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed more evidence, more clarity. The note, the hotel, David, they weren't enough on their own. The next morning, Rachel was her usual self, gliding through the kitchen like nothing had changed. She kissed me on the cheek before I left for work. As if last night hadn't happened, I let her. I played along, but something had snapped in me. At work, I couldn't focus. Every email, every phone call blurred into background noise. I had to know the truth, all of it. When I got home, I waited until Rachel was in the shower before searching again. This time, I wasn't looking for innocent clues. I wanted something damning, something I couldn't explain away. I started with her laptop. She always kept it locked, but I knew her password. A part of me felt sick for even thinking about it. But after last night, I had crossed a line. I logged into her laptop, my hands shaking slightly. Emails, bank statements, a calendar full of appointments and reminders. It was all the usual stuff. But then, deep in her email history, I found something that made my blood run cold. An exchange with David, dated nearly 4 years ago. I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting into knots. This wasn't a recent affair. It hadn't just started. It had been going on for almost the entire duration of our marriage. My hands trembled as I clicked through the emails. They were careful. No explicit messages, no passionate declarations of love. But the tone was unmistakable. Coded language, plans for secret meetings, careful coordination to keep everything hidden. I had been played for a fool. Then, one email stood out. It was brief like the others, but different. David was asking her about something more than their next rendezvous. Did you get the transfer sorted? Make sure he doesn't find out. What transfer? What were they moving behind my back? Money. I scrolled through her bank account next, searching through months of transactions until I found it. A series of regular small withdrawals. Amounts just low enough to avoid suspicion, but enough to accumulate over time. Thousands of dollars had quietly disappeared from our joint account, funneled somewhere I had no idea about. I leaned back in the chair, my mind racing. This wasn't just an affair. She was hiding money, planning something bigger behind my back. Was she preparing to leave me, building some new life with David? But there had to be more. I was certain of it. I dug deeper. Rachel had a second email account, one I didn't recognize. It was registered under a different name, Emily Rayburn. My stomach churned. I hacked into it using the same password. She hadn't even bothered to change it. The emails in this account were different, darker, fewer messages of us, but with an undercurrent that made my skin crawl. The paperwork is almost done. He won't see it coming. Don't forget to cover your tracks. We'll need the final signatures by the end of next month. Whoever she was talking to, they weren't just discussing the affair. This was about me, about my life. The final signatures, covering her tracks. What the hell was she planning? When Rachel got home that evening, I barely heard her come through the door. My mind was buzzing, electrified by the realization that I had only seen the tip of the iceberg. You okay? She asked, setting her pet on the counter. Yeah, I muttered, forcing a smile. Just work stuff. Rough day? She moved closer, her fingers brushing my shoulder, and I had to fight the urge to recoil. You could say that, I replied, my voice flat. Why don't you take the night off? I can cook, and we can just relax, she suggested. Her tone was calm, her smile perfectly composed. But now I knew the truth, or at least I knew enough to start seeing her for what she really was. Sure, I said, my voice strained. That sounds nice. That night, after she had fallen asleep, I went back to my research. I couldn't afford to waste any more time. I needed to know the full scope of her plans. Every piece of information I uncovered led to more questions, more paranoia creeping in. Who was she really working with? What did David know? And how far was she willing to go to cover this up? The burner phone was the last thing I expected to find. It was hidden in the back of her closet, tucked behind old shoes and a stack of photo albums. I felt a chill run down my spine as I held it in my hands. I knew what I was about to find wasn't going to be good, but I had to know. The phone was unlocked, no password this time. She must have thought it was hidden well enough. I opened it, my hands steady now, the fear replaced with cold determination. Messages between Rachel and David flooded the screen, short cryptic exchanges. They were discussing more than just their relationship. They talked about money. They talked about me. Don't worry, he's clueless. We've got time. What about the house? The paperwork needs to go through soon. He'll never see it coming. My stomach churned. She was planning to sell the house, our home, without telling me. And David wasn't just some random lover. He was a full partner in whatever this was. Then I found the message that nearly made me drop the phone. Just make sure Michael doesn't figure it out before the divorce is filed. Keep him distracted. My mind froze. Divorce? She wasn't just leaving me. She was going to take everything. Our house, our money, my dignity. And I wouldn't even see it coming. Everything had been planned, meticulously, carefully. I gripped the phone tighter, a sick feeling rising in my throat. Rachel stirred in bed, mumbling something under her breath. I stood there in the dark, staring at her sleeping form, feeling a tidal wave of emotions crash over me. Anger, betrayal, fear, but most of all, the realization that I had been completely blind to the person she truly was. This wasn't just about infidelity. It never had been. Rachel wasn't just leaving me, she was destroying me. I didn't confront her that night. I wanted to. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, but I couldn't. Not yet. She was still controlling the board, and if I confronted her too early, she'd just twist everything, make me look crazy. I needed more leverage, more clarity, so I kept my head down, pretended everything was fine, even as the lies choked me. I smiled at her over breakfast, kissed her goodnight, all while feeling the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. But Rachel, she started to notice. It was subtle at first, little things. Her eyes lingering on me a moment too long, her questions more probing than usual. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, she asked, "You've been quiet lately. Something on your mind?" I shrugged, pulling on my tie. "Just work stuff. You know how it is." Rachel nodded, but didn't drop it. "Are you sure?" she pressed, her voice soft, almost concerned. "You've seemed distracted." "I'm fine," I said, too quickly. Her eyes narrowed, but she smiled that same sweet, practiced smile. "If you say so." That evening, I was sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV while Rachel sat across from me, scrolling through her phone. I could feel her eyes on me, even when I wasn't looking. She was watching me, studying me, like she was waiting for something, for me to crack, to fall apart. "I've been thinking," she said suddenly, breaking the silence. I glanced over, careful to keep my expression neutral. "Yeah? Maybe we should take a trip. Just the two of us," she suggested, her voice light, casual. "We haven't had much time together lately, and I think it would be good for us." A trip? Now? When she was secretly plotting to divorce me and sell our house behind my back, I had to fight the urge to laugh. "That sounds nice," I lied. "Maybe next month, when things calm down at work." Rachel didn't miss a beat. "Why not this weekend?" I felt my stomach tighten. She was pushing, testing me, trying to see how far she could go. I kept my tone steady, though inside I was barely holding it together. "I've got a lot on my plate right now, maybe next month." She nodded, but her smile faltered, just for a moment. "Okay, next month then." The next few days, things started to get strange. It was little things at first. I'd come home from work and find my guys in a different place than I'd left them. My phone's alarm settings changed, waking me an hour earlier than usual. The thermostat turned up to an uncomfortable level, even though I hadn't touched it. At first, I chalked it up to stress. I was on edge, always thinking about Rachel's plans, her lies, the growing pile of evidence. Maybe I was getting sloppy, forgetting things. That's what I told myself, until it started happening more often, too often to be a coincidence. One morning, I couldn't find my wallet. I tore the house apart, searching every room, my office, the kitchen, the bedroom. It was nowhere. I was about to call Rachel when I found it, right on the kitchen counter in plain sight, exactly where I'd looked 3 times. I froze, staring at it, a chill creeping up my spine. Something was wrong. That night, I woke up around 2 a.m. The sheets beside me were cold. Rachel wasn't in bed. I found her downstairs, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open in front of her. When I stepped into the room, she quickly closed it, her eyes widening as if I had caught her doing something she shouldn't. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, my voice calm even though my pulse was racing. Rachel smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just catching up on some work," she said smoothly. "Go back to bed, honey." I hesitated, but nodded, turning to leave. As I did, though, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was watching me, her eyes boring into the back of my head as I walked upstairs. The gaslighting continued. Every day, I'd find something out of place. My watch missing, then reappearing in a drawer I hadn't touched. Emails I didn't remember sending. Messages on my phone that had been read, even though I hadn't opened them. Rachel started locking the bedroom door at night, claiming it was for safety, that she felt anxious with crime rates going up in the neighborhood. It was subtle, but enough to make me feel like the ground beneath me was shifting, like I was losing control. One evening, I came home to find the living room furniture rearranged. My favorite chair had been moved, the books on the coffee table neatly stacked when I always left them scattered. Rachel was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, acting as if nothing was wrong. "Did you move the furniture?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Rachel glanced over, a puzzled look on her face. "What are you talking about? I haven't touched anything." I stared at her, my stomach churning. "The chair, the books, they're not where I left them." She frowned, tilting her head slightly, as though genuinely confused. "Michael, I haven't moved a thing. Are you sure you're not just forgetting where you put them?" I felt my heart skip a beat. "No, I know where I left them." Rachel's expression softened, and she stepped closer, resting a hand on my arm. "Maybe you've just been under a lot of stress lately. Work has been tough, right? It's easy to lose track of the little things." I pulled my arm away, her touch suddenly unbearable. "I'm not losing track of anything." Rachel sighed, shaking her head slightly. "I'm just worried about you, that's all. You've been distant lately, distracted. I think you might need to take a step back and breathe." "I'm fine," I snapped, a little too quickly. Rachel's eyes flickered with something. Concern? No, it was something else. Satisfaction. She turned away, resuming her task in the kitchen. "If you say so." I was spiraling, and she knew it. Rachel wasn't just keeping me distracted. She was gaslighting me, making me question my own reality. I knew it, but that didn't stop the creeping doubt from settling in. Every day, it felt like the walls were closing in a little more, like I was being pushed closer to the edge. The worst part was how subtle she was. Nothing was overt, nothing so obvious that I could call her out without sounding insane. How could I confront her about moving furniture, or missing keys, or an alarm that had mysteriously reset? It would make me sound like a lunatic, but I knew she was behind it. I needed help, someone to back me up, someone who could confirm I wasn't losing my mind. I called my brother Ethan that weekend. We hadn't spoken much lately, but I needed someone to talk to, someone who knew me. We met up for coffee at a quiet place, somewhere away from prying eyes. "I think I don't know, man. She's messing with me," I said, running a hand through my hair, moving things around, making me question my memory. "I swear, it's like she's trying to make me think I'm going crazy." Ethan sipped his coffee, his brow furrowed. "You sure it's not just stress, Mike? You've been dealing with a lot at work." I shook my head, frustrated. "It's not just that. It's everything. The affair, the missing money. It's like she's setting me up, trying to make me look unstable." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his expression skeptical. "Rachel's always been intense, but this? I don't know, man. You're sure you're not reading too much into it?" His doubt hit me harder than I expected. I stared at him, waiting for the words to come, but nothing I said would convince him. I could see it in his face. He didn't believe me. I left that coffee shop feeling more isolated than I had in weeks. Ethan's doubt had planted a seed of fear. What if I was losing it? What if Rachel's manipulations had already gotten under my skin so deeply that I couldn't even trust myself anymore? I drove home in silence, my mind a storm of paranoia. I knew she was playing with my head, but no one else would believe it. Not yet. And Rachel? She was just getting started. Rachel was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. She moved through the house like a shadow, gliding through our life, watching me, waiting for something, waiting for me to snap, to confront her before I had enough proof to defend myself. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Not yet. I wasn't losing my mind. I knew what she was doing. The gaslighting, the affair, the hidden money. It was all connected. Rachel wasn't just playing a cruel psychological game. She was laying the groundwork for something bigger, something I hadn't quite figured out yet. But I was close. I could feel it. I didn't trust Ethan anymore. After our talk, I could tell he thought I was paranoid, and Rachel would have anticipated that. She knew I'd go to him, and she knew he wouldn't believe me, but I wasn't out of options. I called Claire, an old friend from college. She had gone on to become a private investigator, a damn good one. If anyone could help me, it was her. We met at a quiet bar just outside the city, far enough from Rachel's social circle to avoid being noticed. Claire sat across from me, her dark eyes sharp, taking everything in. "So you're in a mess," she said bluntly after I laid everything out. "Rachel's having an affair. She's moving money, and you think she's trying to gaslight you. Did I get that right?" I nodded. "I know it sounds insane, but..." "No, it doesn't," she cut in, sipping her drink. "It sounds calculated. "You're not the first guy whose wife has tried to ruin his life from the inside out." Her words were a strange relief. Finally, someone believed me. "What can you do?" I asked, leaning in. "I need evidence. Proof that she's planning something. More than just the affair." Claire smirked. "That's the easy part. The harder part is getting it without her realizing she's being watched. You're playing a dangerous game, Mike." "I know," I muttered, rubbing the back of my neck. "But I don't have a choice. I can't let her get away with this." "All right," Claire said, her tone turning serious. "I'll start digging into her finances, see what's really going on with this David guy, and look for any legal paperwork in the system. Divorce filings, property transfers, anything she might be trying to slip under your nose. But Mike, you need to be careful. If she senses that you're onto her, I won't make a move until I have enough," I promised. She looked at me for a moment, her eyes narrowing. "Just make sure you stay one step ahead." The next few days I pretended everything was normal. I played the part of the clueless, overworked husband while Claire started digging into Rachel's life behind the scenes. But Rachel wasn't making it easy. She kept testing me, probing, seeing if I was cracking. One evening, she suggested we sell the house. "What?" I asked, my stomach lurching. Rachel smiled, her tone light. "I've been thinking, this place is too big for just the two of us. Maybe we should sell it. Move somewhere smaller, less stress, less upkeep." I stared at her, trying to keep my expression neutral. "Why now?" "I don't know. It just feels right," she replied, her eyes gleaming in that way that made my skin crawl. "I could reach out to some agents, see what kind of offers we could get." She was pushing again, testing me. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my voice steady. Rachel's smile didn't waver. "Good. It'll be a fresh start for both of us." Later that night, Claire called. "I found something," she said, her voice low and serious. "Rachel's been meeting with the divorce lawyer for the last 6 months. It's not official yet, no filings in the system, but she's preparing. She's also listed your house with a private real estate agent, though the paperwork hasn't gone through. She's waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tightly. "She's trying to take everything." "Looks that way," Claire confirmed, "but it gets worse." Of course it did. It always did. "What?" I asked, my throat dry. "There's a name that keeps popping up in her communications. David. He's not just some guy she's having an affair with. He's her partner. They've been funneling money into a joint account for the past year. If she divorces you, they'll take everything. Your house, your savings. You'll be left with nothing." I felt the blood drain from my face. How is she planning to get away with this? Claire sighed. "She's smart, Mike. She's already set up a narrative that you're unstable. If she goes to court and claims you're paranoid, anxious, out of control, well, she'll look like the victim. She's got it all lined up. You're being boxed in." It all made sense now. The gaslighting, the missing money, the mind games. Rachel wasn't just screwing with me for fun. She was laying the groundwork for something bigger. She was building a case, a narrative where I was the paranoid, unstable husband. If I confronted her now, she'd twist everything, make it look like I was the problem. She was dismantling my life piece by piece. And by the time I realized it, she'd have taken everything. But now, I had Claire. I had the proof. I wasn't trapped anymore. The next morning, Rachel sat across from me at the kitchen table, sipping her coffee like it was any other day. She looked up at me with those calm, calculating eyes, her expression unreadable. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," I said casually, my heart pounding in my chest. "Oh?" Rachel raised an eyebrow. "About selling the house?" "Yeah," I nodded. "I think you're right. Maybe it's time for a fresh start." Her eyes flickered with something. Surprise? Suspicion? But she smiled. "I'm glad you're on board." I leaned back in my chair, forcing a smile. "Let's make it happen." That evening, Claire sent me the final piece of the puzzle. She'd found Rachel's burner phone records, messages between her and David. They were planning to file the divorce papers next month, but not before moving the rest of our joint assets into their hidden account. They were waiting for me to crack, to confront Rachel so she could play the victim, have me declared unstable. But now, I knew the full extent of their plan. I wasn't going to fall into her trap. That night, I watched Rachel as she slept. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, but I knew what she really was. She thought she had me cornered. She thought she'd won, but the game had changed. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I was going to let her think she was still in control. I was going to play along, pretend I was the clueless husband she thought I was. And when the time was right, I'd turn the tables. She had underestimated me. Soon she'd regret it. The next few days were tense. Rachel was smiling more often now, which only fueled my anger. Every time she kissed me goodbye, called me honey, or mentioned our future, I wanted to scream, but I held it together. I had to. The timing wasn't right yet. The first step was securing my assets. Quietly, without making a scene, and I transferred most of my money into an offshore account. Claire had helped me set it up, somewhere Rachel couldn't touch it, somewhere David's greedy hands couldn't reach. Every day, I played the part of the agreeable husband. I let Rachel think she was winning, agreeing to sell the house, talking about the future. But every word I said was calculated. I was setting her up, watching, waiting. Rachel was cautious, but I was more careful. She had no idea what was coming. Then, one evening, just after dinner, Rachel dropped the next part of her plan. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice light, casual. "Maybe we should get the paperwork started for the house. You know, before the market shifts. We could make a really good profit right now." I looked up from my plate, keeping my expression neutral. "You're probably right. The market's in a good place." Rachel's smile was so practiced, so perfectly fake. It made my skin crawl. "I'll call the real estate agent tomorrow. Get the ball rolling." "Sounds good," I said, forcing a smile. She was moving faster now, pushing the plan into motion. She probably thought I was softening, that I'd given up, that I was ready to accept her version of the truth. But while she was setting up her perfect exit, I was preparing mine. The next day, I made my move. Claire had tracked down David's real address, not the rented apartment he used for their rendezvous, but his actual home. He lived a few towns over, in a quiet upscale neighborhood that screamed normal guy with a normal life. I waited until Rachel was at work, then drove out to see him. The house was nice, nothing flashy, just a modest two-story with a perfectly manicured lawn. I parked a few blocks away and walked up to the front door. My heart was pounding, but I kept my head clear. I knocked twice, then stepped back, waiting. David opened the door, looking exactly like I'd imagined. Tall, fit, late 30s. The kind of guy who could walk into a room and make everyone like him without even trying. He blinked in surprise when he saw me, his brow furrowing. "Can I help you?" "You're David, right?" I asked, my voice calm, measured. His eyes flickered with recognition. "Yeah, who's asking?" "Michael," I said simply. "Rachel's husband." That wiped the smirk off his face. For a split second, I saw the truth flash in his eyes. He knew exactly who I was, but he was trying to play it cool. "I think you've got the wrong guy," he said, starting to close the door. I stepped forward, jamming my foot against the doorframe. "No, I don't." David hesitated, glancing down at my foot. I could see the wheels turning in his head. How much did I know? How far was I willing to go? He was sizing me up, trying to figure out if he should slam the door in my face or hear me out. I made the decision for him. Let me in or I'll make this very public. That got his attention. He stepped back, opening the door just enough to let me inside. "You've got some nerve showing up here," he muttered. "I could say the same to you," I shot back, stepping into his immaculate living room. "How long have you been screwing my wife?" David's jaw clenched, but he didn't answer. His silence was confirmation enough. I sat down on his couch, making myself comfortable. "Here's the thing, David. I know everything. The affair, the money, the fact that you and Rachel have been planning this for years. And I'm not going to sit around and let you ruin my life." He crossed his arms, standing by the door like a bouncer. "You think you're going to stop us?" I smiled, a cold hard smile that didn't reach my eyes. "No, I don't plan to stop you. I'm just going to make sure when Rachel pulls the trigger, you're left with nothing." David frowned, his posture stiffening. "What the hell are you talking about? You've been working with Rachel to drain our accounts, right? Funneling money into your little secret stash, planning to take everything in the divorce. Well, here's the problem. I already moved the money. It's gone. She'll get nothing." He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw real uncertainty in his eyes. "Bullshit." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Check it. Call Rachel. Ask her where the money is by the time you two figure it out. I'll be long gone." David shifted on his feet, pulling out his phone. He glanced at me once before dialing. I listened to the muted voice on the other end. Rachel's voice, calm and collected, until it wasn't. Her tone changed, sharp, angry. I couldn't hear the exact words, but I saw David's face pale, his grip tightening on the phone. He stepped away, turning his back to me as their conversation grew more heated. When he hung up, he turned to me, his face a mask of barely controlled rage. "What did you do?" "I leveled the playing field," I said calmly, standing up. Rachel thinks she's going to walk away with everything, but now she's going to be fighting for scraps. And you? Well, I hope you enjoy watching her squirm. David took a step toward me, fists clenched. You think you're so damn smart, huh? You think she's going to let this go? She'll bury you. Maybe, I said, brushing past him. But I'm not the one who's going to be blindsided when it all falls apart. I left David standing in his doorway, seething with frustration. He'd call Rachel. They'd try to regroup, but it wouldn't matter. I had the upper hand now. The money was safe, and I knew enough about their plans to keep them off balance. But this wasn't over yet. That night, I acted like nothing had changed. Rachel came home late as usual, and I greeted her with a smile. A long day? I asked, pouring myself a glass of wine. She smiled back, though I could see the tension behind her eyes. Yeah, just a lot going on at work. Anything I can help with, I offered, playing the part of the oblivious husband. She shook her head. No, I've got it covered. We ate dinner in silence, and I watched her carefully, waiting for a sign, some crack in her perfect facade. But she was too good, too polished. When we went to bed, she curled up next to me, resting her head on my chest like she always did. For a moment, it almost felt real, like maybe, in some twisted way, she still cared. But I knew better. She was playing her game, and so was I.